Welcome to my review of Rance, the quest for Hikari. In case you don't know what Rance is, here's a quick overview. Rance is a fantasy eroge franchise that includes 16 games, 2 OVAs, an audio drama, 3 manga adaptations, and a light novel. Today we'll be taking a look at Rance, the quest for Hikari, the series' first entry, which released all the way back on the 15th of July 1989. In this review, I will avoid spoilers, but in case you have not played the game yet and want to go into it without knowing anything about it at all, I've put links to the AliceSoft Miraheze, where you can download every version of the game for free, into the description. The game is set in the capital city of the Kingdom of Lyses, where Hikari, the daughter of a rich family, has been kidnapped. This is where our protagonist comes in. Rance is an adventurer who is tasked with finding Hikari. He's one of the strongest swordsmen on the continent, and also a complete bastard. Throughout the series, Rance commits numerous crimes such as defamation, blackmail, manslaughter, murder, and most frequently, rape. Now you might be thinking, well, he just sounds like a horrible person, why would I want to play someone like that? And yes, he is a horrible person, but he's also extremely funny. The best thing about the series is, in my opinion, to see how Rance interacts with everyone else. His over-the-top arrogance and hostility towards anyone who isn't a cute girl make him one of the most entertaining characters I've ever seen. The games also never take Rance too seriously. He does have serious moments every now and then, but for the most part, he's a very goofy character. Like, he's the type of guy who can do the most despicable shit imaginable in one scene, and then 5 minutes later, get mad because someone destroyed the sandcastle he built. The second most important character is the series' main heroine, Sil Plain. Sil is a cute and helpful mage girl, and also Rance's slave. Her role throughout the games is mostly to try to act as Rance's moral compass, and if that fails, to get abused by him. Some fans dislike Sil because they think she's a boring character, but for me the dynamic between her and Rance is one of the series' most enjoyable points. Now, let's actually talk about the gameplay. The game is basically an RPG in which you play as Rance through selecting commands from a bar on the right side of your screen. When you're not engaged in combat, these commands are limited to going in a certain direction, interacting with something, and camping, which lets you check and use the items in your inventory, as well as save and load your progress. You start the game in the city, where you have to walk around and talk to characters to obtain clues that might help you in your investigation. In fact, the majority of the game consists of walking around and talking to characters. The city also has, like you would expect from an RPG, numerous shops and other places where you can obtain a variety of items. These places include the pub, the inn, where you have to go to at the end of each day, the weapon store, Paris College, which has been infiltrated by Sil, the item shop, the level shop, where you have to go to level up, the info shop, and the building that will be important later. Besides all these useful locations, there's also the cemetery, where you can go to be there. Seriously, it's the only place in the game where you can't interact with anything. Anyway, while most of these places are pretty self-explanatory, I still have not properly explained Sil's role in this game. If you go to Paris College, you can talk to Sil, who has enrolled there, to get information on Hikari, who was a student there. Besides asking Sil for information on the case, you can also ask her for gold and to heal you, which is pretty useful. And also, since this is an eroge, rape her. Sil isn't the only character in this game you can try to assault. In fact, the option exists for most of them, but it only works out on a few. I guess this would be a good time to talk about the sex scenes. They're kinda bad, to be honest. Most of them are only 3 or 4 sentences long, and while I don't dislike the game's art style, some CGs do look a little rough to say the least. Anyway, while most of the sex scenes are only there because the game is an eroge and have no effect on the gameplay, Sils actually have an interesting mechanic to them. You can choose in which way you want to fuck her by selecting commands from the sidebar, and if you selected them in a particular order, you can learn magic spells, which you can then use in combat. There are 5 different spells you can obtain this way, but you can only use one at a time. Now, before I get to the combat, there still is one thing I have to mention about the walkie-talkie side of the game. This game loves to troll you. What I mean by that is that even though the concept of asking about things and searching for items seems incredibly easy on paper, it still takes forever. The reason for this is that the game is just unfair. Here's an example that drove me insane when I first played the game. At one point in the game, you're in a dungeon and you can look into a closet in a certain room, and the only thing you find in that closet is medicine. Now you can go into a different room and there's a staircase. You cannot go up the stairs because they're rigged or something, but the thing you now need to use the stairs is a pair of shoes that have now just magically appeared in the closet you already searched. And stuff like this happens all throughout the game, which can be a little bit frustrating at times. But as I said, we will now get to the combat system. It sucks. Okay, I guess I should be a little more specific, so here goes. The game uses, like you would expect from an old school RPG, a turn-based combat system. The problem is that it's incredibly simple. When it's your turn, you have these options. Attack, use magic, use a healing item, or flee. When it's the enemy's turn, they usually just attack you. So yeah, that's it. Here's some epic footage of some epic fights I had in this game. When you defeat enemies, they drop gold and XP. You can use gold to buy items and XP to level up in the level shop. Yes, you have to visit a specific location to level up, which does get a little annoying after a while. Now I've pretty much covered everything there is to say about the gameplay. I could talk about the plot of the game, but honestly there isn't really much to say about it. The plot is just a fun little story that presents itself as a mystery, but is overall pretty predictable and not very interesting. The best part about it is the humor, which is honestly my favorite part of the game in general. Now that was pretty much all I had to say about this game, so I could end the video here. However, this was all just about the Windows version. You see, back in 1989 this game released on the PC 98 and the PC 88, and it wasn't until the late 1990s that it was ported to Windows 95. The PC 88 version doesn't have a real port, but there is a mod for the Windows version that changes it to be as close to the PC 88 version as possible. The PC 98 version was not available at all when I started working on this review, but now it is, so I guess I have to talk about that as well. But let's start with the PC 88 version. When the game first released, the PC 98 was relatively new and not as common as the older PC 88. Which is why AliceSoft also developed a version for the PC 88, even though it was clearly an inferior system. You are confronted with this inferiority relatively quickly, since the first thing you notice should be the graphics, which look substantially worse. Moreover, the little animations like the lightning flashes are not present at all in this version. Besides these obvious downgrades that had to be made because of the PC 88's limitations, there are also some interesting changes regarding the gameplay. There are various balancing changes that generally make the game easier. Rance now starts the game with higher HP, accuracy and evasion, and the weapons have higher stats. But the biggest balancing related change has to be the gold you obtain when you defeat the boss of the previously mentioned dungeon. In the Windows version you get 30 gold, which seems fair since it is a very quick fight. In the PC 88 version you get over 26,000 gold, which is insane. With that you can pretty much buy every item in the game and never run out of money. Aside from that, there are also new enemy types, including the Red Henny, which technically makes this version of the game the Red Henny's first appearance. Also, the cemetery isn't useless in this version. You can look around the place and fight monsters, but most importantly there is a new questline on the third day that involves the cemetery, but I won't spoil anything. So those are all the big changes of the PC 88. There are some other minor changes, like slightly different dialogue in some scenes, but nothing huge. Now onto the PC 98 version. To play it you have to use the PC 98 emulator, and I don't know if this is because of the game or because I suck at using emulators, but I couldn't get it to work in proper full screen, so now it looks like this. Okay, so the PC98 version isn't all too different from the Windows version. The only differences in visuals are the font of the text and some other changes of the UI. Gameplay-wise it's also pretty similar. The only real differences are that during combat you don't have the option to flee, and instead of being able to quickly use a healing item you have to select use item and check what healing items you have with you at the moment. So yeah, the combat system is even worse in this version. However, there is a glitch which basically makes you almost unkillable. If you select use item and then exit the item menu without having selected anything, you automatically get healed, even if you don't have any healing items. This is of course game breaking, since there's now no point in ever buying healing items and you can win any battle unless you face an enemy that can kill you in one hit. Aside from that, there is another error, where some dialogue options and item names are either not translated or translated into seemingly random symbols. This isn't that bad, since you can figure out the meaning from the context, but it's still annoying. The last point I want to mention is the soundtrack. The Windows version uses remastered versions of the original tracks, while the PC98 of course uses the original 8-bit versions, and yeah, it's pretty good. I still prefer the remastered soundtrack overall, but some tracks like the theme of the Thief's Cave or Kanami's theme actually sound better in 8-bit in my opinion. Now that is really all I have to say about this game, but should you play it? And if so, which version should you play? I do realize that I probably haven't done a very good job of selling this game, but I would actually recommend playing it. I don't think it's very good, but it is the beginning of the Rance series, and I think the best way to experience Rance is to play everything in order of release, since this way you really get to see the long way the series and AliceSoft in general have come, since almost every game is better than the previous one in one way or another. Besides, it's not like the game is terrible, it has a lot of charm and there are a lot of legitimately funny moments in there, although humor is pretty subjective. It's also very short, you can get through it in under 3 hours, and as I mentioned at the beginning, it's also free, so really you have nothing to lose. As for which version to play, it depends on where your priorities lie. If you care about graphics, play the Windows version. If you think the gameplay is more important, go for the PC88 version. The PC98 version isn't really worth playing at all unless you really want to get as close to the original experience as possible. Okay, I'm done here. Thank you for your time, and I would appreciate it if you clicked the like button and did all the other stuff everyone always mentions. I don't know if I'll continue to make videos yet, but if I do, I'll probably talk about the other Rance games in the order of release, which would mean that next time I'd talk about Rance 2, The Rebellious Maidens. But we'll see. Until then, farewell.
Listen. You know, I dislike sexual assault as much as the next guy. That's some bad stuff. Rape, boo, don't like it. But